So I wish to everyone Merry Christmas for those that have it, and also a future good New Year. So when you'll have the time, you'll say this. I'm going to talk about the history of France. So France was first inhabited by some populations that were descending from Cro-Magnon, human specie in a modern evolving from the glaciary times, as said the archaeologists, and also from another populations that another population that was coming from India mostly, and also that settled a few time in Near East doing agriculture. As what said some archaeologists, there might have been a new discovery saying that some warriors, nomadic warriors of the very, very east of Eastern Europe, that maybe might have changed genetically the component the genetical components of Europe, but they were not defined ethnically. It was extremely old, and most of them, in fact, most of them went to Spain and to England. It was the pre-Celtical times then, and many French words got basis of pre-Celtical. Something called pre-Celtical. There was an exception that was called the Basque inhabiting, and the Basque country, called Basque Country. It was going to be for some parts of it, then later part of France. The Basque Country that was even expanded to the Vasconian Gascogne, the Vascons population in southwest, called Aquitaine. Now that's called Aquitaine, southwest of France. Also, that was later conquered by the Romans, and so then came the Celts. At the very beginning of France, of history of France, came the Celts, which were some brilliant merchants, and they had some kind of sophisticated culture, but most of it was not written. The Celts came mostly from Scandinavia, and also they expanded through Eastern Europe, some parts of Eastern Europe even, and they even had the Celts had a global Celtic empire, even in Mediterranean, where they were doing some commercial trades. Also, something kind of very important. Celts got also ruled after it by the antical Italians, which were called the Romans, Romains in French. We must say, last thing to say about the Celts is that remains still nowadays a Celtic region where there is still a Celtical language that is still spoken, called Bretagne. Bretagne, simply a region under Brittany, a region under the UK, which is Bretagne is in the northwest of France. So also, So the Celts, which were the Celts of France, which were in a global way, simplified way called Gaulois, many populations, got ruled after it when they leave the conquest of Gaul by the Romans, mainly between 58 and 5150 before Jesus Christ. Before Jesus Christ, after Jesus Christ, is a chronological notion, because French, which is one of the countries that is the most Western in Europe, got marked and lived into Christianism, not only, but Christian culture also and influence. So before Jesus Christ, between 58 and 50, the Romans, antiqual Italians, did the conquest of Gaul, antiqual France. And then the Roman Empire inspired some Romans, some warriors coming from Italy, inspired by also the Greek civilization, and also during the times of Caesar, Emperor Caesar, also, and the Roman Empire of Orient got separated from the Roman Empire of Occident by some kind of belief, difference of belief in Christianism after it. There were the Byzantines, and influenced by Greeks more than the others, and also some kind of belief, West Christian beliefs called Catholicism, the Catholics. So the Roman Empire at the time of Occident got invaded by some populations called barbarians, that were nicknamed barbarians, that for most of the historians, those barbarians were pushed by some populations that might have got chased by the Chinese in Far East, and also in Western Asia, which were called the Huns. The Huns, that were some warriors, merely nomadic people living with horses, and that left some traces, but they had no writing. Yes, and they were apparented to some populations of the Far East, most of them. But nomadic troops of the Huns were also not completely defined ethnically, like the Yamna of the very beginning were not defined ethnically, but they were not completely defined ethnically. There might have been other populations that added themselves during the move-in from Far East and Western Asia to Europe. They pushed themselves Germanic populations, which were themselves coming from Scandinavia for most of them, and which were also in Eastern Europe, once again, like the Celts. those Germanic populations. Among some of them were the Franks that were which used to talk Frankish and used to also had a culture. They had a culture called Frankish culture, and they were going to give their name to France. And also the Burgunds in Burgundy, Bourgogne, and in central France, Germanic population too, and also the Visigoths, the Goths that separated themselves, the Goths that got later defined. Some remain only called Goths, but there were the Ostrogoths that got into southeastern France, also in Italy, like the Lombardians, also Lombards. But the Ostrogoths and the Visigoths that got to southwest of France, and even places which were not the south. But the Franks got the most important part of France, and they settled in the Franks. So we must say that the barbarian, so-called barbarian invadings of Roman Empire happened in 375 and 406, 406, 375 and 406. The latest ones were the Teutonic times with the Teutons, but it was something else, and they didn't come to France. The Roman Empire also there had been later also the arrival of Vikings which were coming again from Scandinavia, which were some very clever and brilliant merchants, but also some warriors, and they used to terrify during some times. They used to terrify a few the inhabitants of France. The Vikings, they came and settled mostly in Normandy, but some even came, they even traveled in France, even in the southwest a few, but they left little traces. Most of it was Normandy. But the Romans, antiqual Romans, after the Franks arrival, Franks people arrival, someone called Clovis, king of Franks, got baptized to Christianism. As Christianism expanded itself from the Orient to Greece very early, and finally, after it, the Romans themselves adopted, as they used to adopt different beliefs of their eras of their empire. Some adopted the Christian belief, and Clovis, king of Franks, got baptized between something like 496, 506, 496, 506. He got baptized, Clovis. And then even appeared an empire which was called the Saint-Empire Romain Germanique. So the Franks got influenced by the Roman administration, and also after most of them got baptized to Christianism, they created themselves an empire called the Germanic Roman Saint Empire. It was in 800 after Jesus Christ, 800 after Jesus Christ, and also their king called Charles, later called Carolus Magnus, Charlemagne, got crowned in 800 after Jesus Christ also, of the Saint-Empire Romain Germanique. Charlemagne did many laws and changing of laws, and parts of the Germanic moral and Germanic culture, with its ancient beliefs, a few in a social way, got incorporated inside the laws, the French laws. Also about teachings and culture for France. So the King of France, and then also different kings after it succeeded and descended from Charlemagne. Also then came the War of 100 Years, Guerre de Cent Ans, between English and French, and parts of England had some coming of some French people periodically, temporarily, and also parts of the southwest got parts of the southwest of France lived under the conquest of the English, with Aliénor d'Aquitaine, and also a queen, and also the far, like we could say, far north regions of France also lived temporarily under settlings of English, of British people. It was between one 1337 and so it was between 1337 and 1453. 1453. Guerre de Cent Ans, and then also it was kind of the Middle Age time. Also had been persecution times and Inquisition times, where there were some kind of the church, the representing of the church in France was doing some kind of like we could say, they even practice punishment in France for people that were considered as heretics, like there had been with the Cathars in southwest of France. Some kind of Manichaeism, a few something derived from Christianism, and also after it, the influence of Protestantism coming from North Europe and Central Europe, where there was some persecutions called also guerre de religion. Some of them fled to the southwest also, but not. Some could find some refuge and protect themselves with some arrears, but some could not. and some fled to America, also to parts of America. Also came after it after long hard times during Middle Age. Also came some kind of evolving and beginning to think about culture, and like we could say. Siècle des Lumières, something called the Century of Lights, say Siècle des Lumières. It was something with some people talking about French culture and being progressist, like we could say, progressism, progressist, like they wanted to progress and to understand the world fully around themselves, learn about the whole world, discover it with some kind of positivism, positive thinking. And Siècle des Lumières had many philosophers, but it was also cultural, and it was also one of the most famous philosophers of the time was Voltaire. Voltaire. Also, about literature movement and cultural movement, and also it was during 1715 and 1789, and considered as hard times that from the beginning of Middle Age to that time. After it came a revolution called Révolution Française, in Révolution Française in 1789, Révolution Française, with also after it the execution after it of the royalty of France, the King of France, royalty of France, and Louis XVI, Louis the 16th, and also philosophers and even times of different ideologists, also revolting of the French population, and also Lafayette. Later, Lafayette came to what was going to be USA, what was going to be America, and he helped the people that founded USA, but it was a few later. Also, about the main events of French history. Main events of French history also got at that time, French culture was highly esteemed. It was considered of high value and like something like sophisticated, and also everyone which was kind of well educated and well considered used to learn French and speak French, even in very numerous parts of the world. People used to learn French from the courts to the thing called bourgeoisie, and French culture was also an influence across Europe and even further than Europe. And then came someone called Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon was coming from a place in the south, from the Mediterranean regions near France, and then after it belonging to France. And so Napoleon Bonaparte began slowly to become military chief, and he also Napoleon, after the times of the revolution, finally became himself an emperor with all his conquests. And it was in November 1807, 1807, Emperor of France, Napoleon. Later, his descendants, like Napoleon III, did some conquests too. He created a very important empire, but it stayed not as long as he wanted, this empire. And then the French got a few angry, and also some people even from outside France exiled him for a time, exiled him in an island called Saint Helena in the Atlantic Ocean, as supposed to be some kind of jail, isolating him. Then he came back. Napoleon the First, and came also Napoleon the Third, and all those things. Also, the discoveries of the French and of the French state and French kingdom began as some discoveries in strategical interest, also an economical interest with La Compagnie des Indes of Louis XIV before, began in 1534 and 1763, all across the world, all across the globe, and also to a more important time in 1830, 1830 to some things like the 70s, 1900, something like 70 and all that. Was the time called beginning in 1830, the beginning of the time called colonial French Empire, something that was named so-called colonial French Empire. Also, as it was merely some parts of Africa and a few territories of India. Also influence in Middle East and Near East, and also parts of Africa and parts of Asia, like Southeast Asia, and also commercial activities and diplomatic and strategical influences in China also, but the territories of the French colonial empire were in Southeast Asia and parts of Africa mainly, because at the time also with fleeing of Protestants and the French crown, gave up for the English and the Dutch Louisiana, something called Louisiana with the Cajun, and parts of Canada, a few parts of USA, Louisiana especially, and parts of Canada and Quebec. So France, except in the Caribs, and except in a territory in South America called Guyane. Except those ones, France had no more territories in the Americas. So mainly Africa and Southeast Asia. Then after it in the 70s, mostly chronologically in the 70s, there were the times of independence of different regions of the world. And so the colonial French Empire, as the British colonial empire too, got dislocated, and most of it disappeared. Also in the Pacific, something called Polynesia, and New Caledonia, which are now still in France, like some parts of the West Indies, some parts of the Caribs. But in the Pacific, where they have most of them, their cultural laws, their autonomous laws, and their autonomous representings of authorities too, partly. So it's partly autonomous. It's between the Americas and between Asia, called the Pacific Islands. Also, what else can I say about French history? What else can I say? Also, there had been also between 1870 and 1871 the main parts of the French-Prussian Wars, as Bismarck was the founder of Prussia Empire, which contained Germany. And also some people choosing the French nationality later went away from the Prussian Empire and went through France, through all across the French territories, some of them. But in 8,000, between 1870 and 1871, the Franco-Prussian War, la guerre franco-prussienne, and then later between 1914 and 1918, and later after it 39 and 45. 39 and 45 came also the different world wars, where France fought, and they finally won. Also with the Axe and les Alliés. France was part of les Alliés. What else can I say? So the 70s, with the independence of several French-ruled colonial areas. What else can I say? also economics, as there had been between 1770 and also 1700 80, 99, the Industrial Revolution, where many people from the country, many people that were peasants, want to find a job as workers in mines and in industry, different industries. There had been, and after it also, the economical rise, and after 45. After 45, the after the Second World War and the winning of Les Alliés, which comprised USA and Russia. USA influenced his ways and his view of democracy, and also its economical model called capitalism. And France also got into the commercial activities called capitalist, and also yes. Also, there are several regional languages and dialects in France, and contrarily to Italy, Spain, Portugal, Germany, even Netherlands. The regional languages were banned and they were forbidden and punished. Were the people that were punished were the persons that tried to talk the regional languages. Some remain, some try to still talk it. Many regions had their own languages, but the most famous are Breton, from Bretagne, Celtic language, Basque, kind of mysterious very old language from the southwest, near Spain. Catalan or Catalonian also talked in the south of Languedoc-Roussillon. Occitan with different forms. Occitan, influenced by the antiqual Italian language, but also by other languages like Celtic, even a few Germanic. From south of France, many different languages and dialects of Occitan. You also got in the north, the very north region of France, the Ch'ti or Ch'timi. Also, you got the Germanic parts of France, the east of France, like Alsace, Alsacien, also Lorrain, and even other languages like in the center of France, with a center of France with Celtic influence called Auvergnat, and also Franc-Comtois near Switzerland, Franc-Comtois, many different languages, even the Normandy regional language. But the most famous are those that remained. There are several books about the regional languages in France, but most of them are no more practiced, or a few practiced, but most of the time by old people, or very old people. Yes, about the history of France. That's it. History of France and French culture.